Emotional drainage in relationships can be a silent and gradual process. At first, you might not notice how much energy you are losing because you're so focused on being there for the other person. You may even convince yourself that it's your responsibility to carry them, to fix their problems, to be the source of comfort and strength for them. But as time goes on, what started as a small emotional investment can begin to feel like a heavy weight on your shoulders. This is emotional drainage. God does not want you to be drained by relationships. In fact, He wants your relationships to be life-giving, not life-taking. In John 10:10, Jesus says, "I have come that they may have life and have it to the full." Life-giving relationships are marked by mutual respect, support, and encouragement. They help you grow and move closer to the person God created you to be. But when someone takes more than they give, you start to feel depleted. You give and give, but no matter how much you invest, it's never enough. They ask for more, and you feel as though you're always on empty. When you're in a relationship that drains you emotionally, you begin to feel the impact in every area of your life. You may notice that you're exhausted after every interaction with this person, not because the tasks at hand are too difficult, but because you're giving of yourself in a way that isn't reciprocated. Over time, this constant depletion can begin to wear on your emotional, mental, and even physical health. You may feel constantly overwhelmed, anxious, or even stuck, as though you're unable to move forward in life because you're spending all your energy on trying to fix, please, or satisfy someone else. The danger of emotional drainage is that it clouds your judgment and leaves you unable to recognize the unhealthy dynamics that might be at play. You might feel as though you are doing everything right, but it becomes clear that the other person is not making any effort to meet you halfway. They don't care to change, to contribute, or to improve the relationship. They become a drain, not only on your emotions, but on your capacity to think clearly, make decisions, and move forward in your life. And before long, you may find yourself in a state of emotional depletion, unable to feel the joy or peace that God promises. You may start to feel resentment building up, or you might try to ignore the feelings of exhaustion in the hope that it will improve over time. But the truth is, this emotional draining isn't something that can be ignored indefinitely. It is a signal that something isn't right. God designed you to be a vessel, but not to be a bottomless pit. You're meant to be filled with His love and peace. But when you're continually giving without receiving, or without a mutual exchange of love and care, your spirit will wear thin. This is why emotional drainage is such an important sign that God may be leading you to give up on someone. He doesn't want you running on empty. He doesn't want you feeling perpetually exhausted or constantly giving at the expense of your own well-being. God calls us to love one another, but He never calls us to lose ourselves in the process. If you're in a relationship where you feel emotionally drained, God may be calling you to take a step back, reflect, and evaluate if this relationship is truly God's will for your life. Disrespect and toxicity are two of the most dangerous elements that can exist in a relationship. Both of these can corrode the foundation of trust and love, leaving nothing but pain and resentment in their wake. Disrespect is often subtle at first, disguised as small jabs, sarcastic remarks, or dismissive attitudes. But over time, these small cracks in the relationship grow deeper, undermining the mutual respect that every healthy relationship should be built upon. When someone consistently disrespects you, it chips away at your sense of worth, your dignity, and your ability to show up as the person God created you to be. Toxicity goes beyond simple disrespect. It involves behaviors that are not only hurtful, but destructive. Toxic people often manipulate situations, twist words, and project their own insecurities onto others, making them feel inferior or responsible for problems that aren't theirs to own. Their words and actions can create an atmosphere of fear, confusion, and emotional instability. If you're in a relationship marked by toxicity, you might feel as though you are walking on eggshells, always anticipating the next confrontation or the next emotional blow. Every interaction feels like a battle, and no matter how much you try, nothing ever seems to be enough. God did not call us to be in relationships that strip us of our peace or lead us into a cycle of hurt and self-doubt. In fact, he calls us to relationships that build us up, encourage us, and help us grow in his image. In Ephesians 4:29, it says, "Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is helpful for building others up according to their needs, that it may benefit those who listen." Disrespect, on the other hand, does the opposite. It tears down, it undermines, and it leads you to question your own worth and your place in the relationship. Toxic behavior in relationships often comes with a pattern. It's not a one-time occurrence. It's a consistent theme. You may find yourself repeatedly forgiving the person, overlooking their behavior, or trying to explain it away. But the truth is, when toxicity becomes a repeated behavior, it's no longer an isolated incident. It's a clear sign that the relationship is not serving your well-being, and it's not aligned with the love and respect that God intended. One of the hardest things about dealing with disrespect and toxicity is that they often don't come from strangers. They can come from people you love deeply, family members, close friends, or even romantic partners. These relationships can be the hardest to walk away from because of the emotional investment and the history you share. You may try to rationalize their behavior or believe that things will change, but more often than not, toxic behavior only escalates, and disrespect becomes more blatant. What happens when you constantly allow disrespect and toxicity to permeate your relationships is that you begin to lose yourself in the process. You start to doubt your worth, question your boundaries, and become numb to the things that once brought you peace and joy. You may even begin to justify the other person's behavior, making excuses for them rather than holding them accountable for their actions. And so what you already have going on, native ability and self-doubt, you're asking the Lord to do when you tell the truth about yourself. In doing so, you slowly diminish your ability to stand up for yourself and protect your heart. God is not calling you to endure a life of disrespect, manipulation, or toxicity. He is calling you to freedom, to a place where you can thrive, heal, and experience his love in its fullness. If you find yourself in a relationship marked by disrespect and toxicity, it may be time to reevaluate that relationship, not just for your own sake, but because God wants better for you. He doesn't want you stuck in a pattern that drags you down, but rather in relationships that lift you up and lead you closer to him. No, spiritual growth is one of the clearest indicators that a relationship may not be aligned with God's purpose for your life. When you enter into a relationship, whether it's with a friend, family member, or romantic partner, the goal should always be to grow together, not just in worldly accomplishments, but spiritually as well. In 2 Corinthians 6:14, the Bible tells us, "Do not be yoked together with unbelievers. For what do righteousness and wickedness have in common? Or what fellowship can light have with darkness?" The idea behind this is not that we should avoid relationships with those who don't share our faith, but rather that we should not allow relationships to pull us away from God's calling on our lives. If a relationship consistently drags you further away from your relationship with God, it's a clear sign that something is off. Spiritual growth is all about moving forward in your relationship with God, becoming more like Christ in thought, word, and deed. If the person you're in a relationship with is not encouraging your spiritual growth, and in fact making it harder for you to connect with God, that's a problem. For example, when you try to pray or read the Bible, but your interactions with them distract you, belittle your faith, or make you feel ashamed of your beliefs, it's a sign that you're not growing spiritually. If you find yourself spending more time defending your faith or compromising your values just to maintain peace, then the relationship is hindering your spiritual development. Spiritual growth is also about building up one another in faith, encouraging each other to pursue God's will, and helping each other to mature. But when you are consistently the only one putting effort into growing spiritually, it creates an imbalance. A healthy relationship should be a partnership where both individuals are helping one another grow closer to God, supporting each other in prayer, and encouraging each other in their walk with Him. But if the other person shows no interest in nurturing their faith, or worse, mocks or undermines yours, then it's likely that they will pull you down rather than lift you up. There are times when relationships can lead to spiritual stagnation. You might find yourself stuck in a cycle of bad habits, destructive behaviors, or doubt because the relationship isn't encouraging growth, but enabling complacency. You begin to accept spiritual mediocrity because it feels easier than confronting the issues. You stop challenging each other to become better versions of yourselves and instead settle for unhealthy dynamics that prevent you from thriving. This stagnation doesn't just affect you individually, it affects the trajectory of your life. Spiritual growth requires you to consistently move forward, to press on toward the goal of becoming more like Christ. But if the relationship is holding you back, you're no longer moving forward. You're stuck. Another indicator of no spiritual growth is the lack of accountability. In healthy relationships, you should have people who hold you accountable, who love you enough to speak the truth into your life, even when it's difficult. But when you're in a relationship that offers no spiritual accountability, you may find that you're slowly slipping away from the standards that God has set for you. Accountability is a safeguard against sin and a tool for personal growth. Freedom. If the person you're with doesn't help you stay accountable to your faith, then you're walking alone in your journey of growth. And this can lead to dangerous spiritual isolation. Ultimately, relationships are meant to be a place where you can become the person God created you to be. If you find that someone is preventing you from growing spiritually, whether through constant distractions, negative influences, or a lack of support, you need to consider whether this relationship is in alignment with God's plan for your life. Spiritual growth is vital to your purpose, and any relationship that hinders it can limit your potential and prevent you from fulfilling the calling God has placed on your life. Constant manipulation in relationships is one of the most subtle but destructive forms of control. It is a tactic that can slowly erode your sense of self, making you feel like you're always in the wrong, always at fault, or constantly having to justify your thoughts, feelings, and actions. Manipulation is when someone uses deceit, guilt, or other underhanded tactics to control or influence your behavior and emotions for their benefit. It can come in many forms: emotional manipulation, guilt tripping, playing the victim, or gaslighting, where your perception of reality is twisted until you doubt your own mind. At first, manipulation can seem harmless. A person might say things like, "If you really loved me, you would do this for me," or "You always know how to make me feel better. Why can't you just do it this time?" These words may seem like simple requests or expressions of need, but when you begin to examine the patterns, it becomes clear that the person is not seeking genuine connection or growth in the relationship. They are seeking control. They want to bend you to their will, and over time, they begin to establish the groundwork for keeping you on their emotional string. The emotional toll of constant manipulation is not immediately obvious. It often creeps in gradually, making you feel like you are responsible for the other person's happiness, mood, or well-being. They might constantly make you feel guilty for not doing enough, for not meeting their unspoken or unreasonable expectations, or for not always being there when they need you. What starts as one small guilt trip turns into a pattern where you begin to second guess your decisions, your priorities, and your worth. Manipulation has a way of turning the tables, making you feel like you're the one who's wrong for wanting boundaries or for seeking space. A manipulative person will often use your compassion and love against you. They know that you care about them, and they will exploit that love to get you to act in ways that are not in your best interest. This kind of manipulation can even make you feel like you're being selfish for standing up for yourself. You begin to feel like you're always in a position where you're being asked to prove your loyalty, prove your love, or prove your worth. This constant pressure can lead to feelings of resentment, confusion, and frustration as you realize that no matter how much you give, it's never enough. In a relationship where constant manipulation is present, boundaries become blurry or non-existent. You find it difficult to say no because you fear the consequences, whether that's anger, withdrawal, or guilt tripping. The manipulative person uses these tactics to keep you off balance, to make you feel like you're walking on eggshells, never sure of where you stand. They might also play the victim card, making you feel responsible for their emotional state or problems, even if those problems have nothing to do with you. This keeps you in a cycle of self-doubt and guilt while they retain control over the relationship's dynamic. Over time, manipulation can distort your reality, causing you to question what's truly happening. Gaslighting, for example, is a manipulative tactic where the person makes you doubt your perception of events, your memories, or your feelings. They may twist situations so that you feel like you're the one at fault for things that are not your responsibility. The goal is to make you feel like you're always in the wrong, creating a sense of dependency on their version of the truth. Lida has mastered the art of spending lies. When you're constantly manipulated, it's easy to lose your sense of identity, your ability to trust your instincts, and even your self-esteem. God does not call us to relationships where manipulation is the cornerstone. Ephesians 4:15 urges us to speak the truth in love, and healthy relationships should be built on honesty, trust, and mutual respect. Manipulation, on the other hand, undermines all of that. It thrives on deceit, control, and selfishness, creating an environment where love is conditional and your well-being takes a back seat to the other person's desires. And if you're constantly being manipulated, it's crucial to recognize that this is not a healthy dynamic, and God's will for your life is not to remain trapped in such a relationship. A lack of accountability in a relationship can create a toxic environment where one person avoids responsibility for their actions while the other is left to carry the weight of the consequences. Accountability is a vital aspect of any healthy relationship because it builds trust, encourages personal growth, and ensures that both parties are held to a standard of honesty and integrity. When one person in the relationship refuses to take responsibility for their actions, it disrupts the balance, leading to frustration, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. We have to be happy. In a relationship where accountability is absent, there is often a constant cycle of blame shifting. If something goes wrong, the person who lacks accountability will find ways to deflect blame, often pointing fingers at others or external circumstances. They may refuse to acknowledge how their words or actions contributed to the situation and instead place the responsibility entirely on someone else. This creates an imbalance of responsibility where one person is always left cleaning up the mess while the other avoids any form of correction or self-reflection. When there is no accountability, growth within the relationship becomes stunted. Accountability requires individuals to be open to feedback, willing to admit when they've made a mistake, and humble enough to learn from those experiences. If someone consistently refuses to own up to their behavior, they limit their ability to grow emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. Well, look, without this growth, the relationship remains stagnant and may even regress as unresolved issues continue to build up and no one is taking the necessary steps to move forward. This lack of accountability can also breed a sense of injustice, where one person feels constantly overlooked or unheard. When mistakes are made and the other person refuses to take responsibility, it often leaves the person who is accountable feeling invisible or unimportant. They may find themselves endlessly apologizing, trying to smooth over problems, or taking on more than their fair share of emotional labor, while the other person escapes without consequence. Over time, this leads to frustration and feelings of being undervalued, as the accountable person feels as though their efforts are not reciprocated. In relationships without accountability, trust begins to erode. Trust is built on the understanding that both parties will be truthful, reliable, and responsible for their actions. However, when someone repeatedly fails to take responsibility, they violate that trust, causing doubt to creep in. It becomes difficult to rely on someone who refuses to be accountable because there's no assurance that they will own up to their mistakes or make efforts to change. This leads to a breakdown in communication, as one person may stop expressing their concerns out of fear that the other person will not listen or respond appropriately. The result is an unhealthy dynamic where honesty and openness are replaced by silence and resentment. Another harmful aspect of a lack of accountability is that it can prevent healing and reconciliation. In any relationship, conflict is inevitable, but resolution is only possible when both parties are willing to admit their faults and work together to address the issues at hand. Without accountability, arguments go unresolved and wounds remain open. The person who is not held accountable may continue to engage in harmful behavior without any effort to change, while the other person feels stuck, unable to move forward because the underlying issues are never addressed. When there is no accountability, the emotional toll on the responsible party can be immense. They may feel overwhelmed by the burden of trying to maintain the relationship, constantly trying to fix things or bear the weight of their partner's mistakes. This creates a toxic cycle where one person takes on the role of caretaker or fixer while the other remains detached from any personal responsibility. It remains that way because both women feel this grievance. Eventually, the responsible person becomes drained, feeling as though they are carrying the relationship alone, and the lack of accountability only deepens the divide between them. God calls us to be in relationships that are built on love, honesty, and mutual respect. In Ephesians 4:2-3, we are reminded to be completely humble and gentle, be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace. This requires accountability. Each person must be willing to recognize their shortcomings and work together to nurture the relationship. When accountability is absent, the relationship becomes one-sided and ultimately fails to reflect the love and peace that God desires for us to experience. The contrast between peace and turmoil is one of the clearest signs in any relationship that can point to whether or not God is telling you to give up on someone. Peace is not just the absence of conflict, but the presence of harmony, security, and a deep sense of well-being that comes from being aligned with God's will. It's a peace that transcends circumstances, a peace that, as Philippians 4:7 says, surpasses all understanding. Turmoil, on the other hand, is a constant state of unease, confusion, and inner chaos. It is a disturbance that disrupts your sense of peace, leaving you feeling unsettled, anxious, and out of sync with the peace that God desires for you. When you're in a relationship that is supposed to be life-giving but instead brings constant turmoil, it's an indication that something is not right. God's plan for relationships is never to bring you confusion or chaos. He wants relationships to be places where you find peace, encouragement, and strength to grow in His image. But when peace is replaced by turmoil, it becomes harder to discern God's voice, and His guidance feels distant or unclear. The constant noise of conflict, manipulation, or emotional instability can cloud your ability to connect with God and find the peace He promises. Turmoil often manifests in several ways, from ongoing arguments that never seem to resolve to emotional manipulation that causes constant strain. If a relationship is marked by consistent emotional turbulence, whether through frequent misunderstandings, constant drama, or even silence and withdrawal, it becomes draining and unhealthy. The unresolved conflicts leave you in a state of tension, always waiting for the next blow-up or emotional crisis. Instead of feeling safe and secure in the relationship, you feel like you're constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing what will trigger the next wave of turmoil. This kind of instability breeds anxiety and stress, not just in the relationship itself, but in every area of your life. This turmoil also affects your spiritual life. Peace is a fruit of the Spirit, and when you are caught in the storm of turmoil, it becomes difficult to hear God's voice, let alone follow His direction. You may begin to feel spiritually drained, unable to focus on prayer or scripture, or you may even question God's presence in your life because the turmoil has overshadowed everything else. You might also notice that the relationship keeps pulling you away from things that once brought you peace, like your quiet time with God, time with supportive friends, or even just moments of rest. What once felt like a place of refuge now feels like a battleground, and the joy and peace you once had in your spiritual life may seem like distant memories. On the other hand, peace brings a sense of calm and stability. When a relationship is marked by peace, it doesn't mean that there are no challenges or disagreements. It means that, despite the conflicts, there is mutual respect, understanding, and a desire to seek resolution. In healthy relationships, the goal is not to avoid conflict, but to handle it in a way that is constructive, where both individuals listen to each other and work toward a common understanding. Peace in a relationship is found in the ability to communicate openly and honestly, knowing that even in difficult moments, you are both committed to the well-being of one another and the relationship. In the absence of turmoil, there is room for growth, for connection, and for spiritual deepening. Relationships grounded in peace allow you to bring your full self to the table, knowing that you are accepted, loved, and respected. You are free to be vulnerable and honest, knowing that even when there is disagreement, the love and care for each other remain unwavering. The peace that flows from these relationships creates an environment where both individuals can grow closer to God, strengthening each other's faith and encouraging each other to live according to His will. When turmoil becomes a consistent pattern in a relationship, it may be time to step back and evaluate whether this relationship is truly aligned with the peace that God desires for you. Relationships should not be a source of constant emotional chaos. God desires for you to experience His peace in every area of your life, including your relationships. And if peace is continually replaced by turmoil, it may be a sign that you need to listen to what God is trying to tell you. In conclusion, relationships are meant to build us up, encourage spiritual growth, and align us with God's purpose for our lives. However, when certain signs like emotional drainage, disrespect, toxicity, lack of accountability, constant manipulation, and a constant state of turmoil overshadow the relationship, it becomes clear that it's no longer life-giving. God calls us to love, but He also calls us to walk in peace and truth. If a relationship consistently depletes you, hinders your spiritual growth, or pulls you away from God's peace, it may be a signal to step back. Healthy relationships are built on respect, mutual accountability, and a shared desire to grow closer to God. Trust that God will guide you to the right relationships, ones that strengthen your faith and allow you to flourish in His love. Don't be afraid to let go of what is harmful, knowing God has something better for you.